Come on,
How,
man, it's an episode about anger. Don't be laughing.
I'm not that angry. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Blokes podcast. Ryan Hassan here from the Centre for Healing, joined as always by Nick Sutherland from Myndfit. Nico, how are you, mate? What's news in your part of the world?
I'm in a very deliberate state at the present at the
Deliberate
moment.
state.
Um, hmm. we Em and I watched a documentary a while ago on tiny houses,
Hmm.
and a lady in there, she found out she had cancer and she was high flying corporate, blah blah blah, and she got the news, so she downsized and she wanted to live a more deliberate life. And I really we really liked that term. We'd been talking about mindfulness and being present and everything. Um, at work with clients, we teach them meditative exercise classes, slow walking, juggling, and trying to live a meditative life. But I'd never really used the word deliberate in it. So um, it just made sense. It was just a really good fit for what we're doing. And a client came in this morning and said, "How are you?" And I unconsciously I wasn't trying to be deliberate, but it was just I said, I'm aware that I have a lot of things to potentially try and achieve today, so I'm just trying to stay out of it and observe it and not get, caught up or swept away and under a sense of I have to or anything. And she was just looking at me like, "Yeah, right." I said, "How are you?" She goes, "I am all of those things as well." Because usually clients just say good, and
Yeah,
already good's a swear word as well, because good's not doesn't give us much to work with.
yeah.
Um,
Same as
but she
happy.
was, she was,
Fluff word. It's a
she,
fluff word.
it is a fluff word. She was in a bit, and it's fine out there with, but in here,
Yeah.
I need to know how you're generally feeling, as I've spoken about before. So, but it was an interesting one. She has, you have a habit of this, Nick. You have a knack for, as you're speaking, I'm going, is he talking with this because he's picking up on what I'm actually feeling right now? Because what I was speaking was exactly what we had to work on in her session. So, do you ever, does that happen with you? Does that,
Yeah.
yep, you just know what your clients are on
Yeah.
some level.
Yeah,
It
100%. Yeah,
happens.
it happens all the time. I often
Yeah,
have clients, their words are, "Can you get out of my head, please?" And I'm like, "Hey, I
yeah.
can't help it."
I've
And
got one client in particular.
we'll also kind of, I don't know if you find this well, but we go through periods in our life when we're sort of working through different things, and then we'll attract people like clients that are kind of about to go through the same
Totally,
struggles and that kind of thing. And
totally.
oh man, when we had the center, because I saw it not only with me, but we had all the girls there as well. And yeah, they were like, my God, this week it's all been this with clients, and it was stuff that they just have to work through themselves. So yeah, it's really interesting how that works.
I've caught myself on numerous times talking to a client, and it sounds like I'm talking to myself. But as a therapist, you've got to keep your shit out of the room.
Yep.
So and I'm like, oh, that's some good advice. I might just store that one away
Yeah.
for myself for later on. But it's funny who turns up is, what they need to work on is what I need to work on outside of these sessions. So,
Yeah, it's hilarious. So what is this? So what is this deliberate life uh, going to look like for you and them? Like, what is this? Where are we leading with this? You guys getting a tiny house?
well,
Didn't you
it
just
sort of
buy a
links
house?
back to
Didn't you just buy a big house?
not a big house.
It
It's a
is compared
moderate
to a
home, but
tiny house.
it is compared to a tiny house. Yes, it suits us. Well, it's I've my philosophy of living life slowly as possible. I guess that's what it is, and when we're talking about deliberate, it's conscious, it's aware, it's present, it's I'm choosing to do this. So, a client this morning asked me how much I meditate, and I said I don't really talk to clients about my meditative practice because it's going to be very different to theirs. I've spent years practicing my meditation, and I'm now living a meditative life. So, in that regard, I'm more present more often. So, um, it comes back to I'm listening to the words that I'm speaking, and I'm aware of what's coming out of my mouth. I'm aware of how I'm actively engaged with you and the conversation that we're in. I'm mindful of what I just ate for lunch, and I was there for the experience of it. So
Mhm.
being deliberate is just being, I guess, in the driver's seat and staying in your power and choosing how you think and feel and behave more often than not.
Yeah, I like that word as well. It's an empowering word. It's
Hmm.
like, how you going? I'm living a deliberate life. I like that.
Yeah, yeah,
That hits. That feels good.
yeah.
Living
It
a deliberate
lands.
life.
But it comes back to something we were talking about as well this morning with this client, how, and we've spoken about this before, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Hmm.
And in order, I like the expression or the philosophy that in order to have things you've never had, you need to do things you've never done.
Mm.
And so many people are wishing, wanting, hoping to feel peaceful or calm or happy or content or whatever. But all those things are symptoms. They're byproducts of all the training that we do here. Just like a body that is free of disease and illness and that is strong and resilient and healthy is a byproduct of a training regime that people go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah.
So essentially we're getting to the point where if you're not meditating, if you're not putting in the time and effort and energy of the practice, then you're not going to get the results of what a meditative mind gives you.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I had a client recently as well who just finished up this week. Yeah, this week. But yeah, he'd sort of started putting in the work the last kind of 6 months, but he was sort of making these changes in his life. He'd realized how much his mind was bugging him and making him anxious. So he reached out and got help for that. He got his physical health in order, started eating the right things. He stopped partying and drinking as much and all that kind of stuff, and focused on his young family that he had. And all of a sudden, from the start of this year, so from sort of 2021, right at the start up until now, he's like, I just can't believe how good things are. Like it was some sort of accident, and I'm like, mate, it's no accident. It's like you've done the actions. Because I say to people all the time, I'm like, when we think about, we talk about our future self, and I'm like, your future self is going to one day be your present self. You're going to be sitting in those shoes. And it's like you've done all the things and got all your ducks in a row and have been doing the right things, that now you're sitting in your future self that, you were, and now you've kind of got a life that you wouldn't have thought was possible 6 months ago. And that's no accident. Because like you said, I think people think, maybe if I go and get struck by lightning, then everything will change. But we keep doing the same things, but we have to make conscious and deliberate change. And that can be very uncomfortable. And one of the things that he was struggling with a bit as well was social circles, having to now start to maybe change social circles or limit time with some people and form new relationships, because as you step out of an old life and into a new one, a lot of your old friends are still doing the same things that you stepped away from because you wanted a better life.
Mm. Yeah, but everything's impermanent. So when we operate, and this is what it comes down to, is we're changing our clients' operating systems. We're not trying to change who they are. We're trying to change
Mm.
how they operate. And so when you can operate from a more liberated operating system where, if friends come, let them come. If friends go, let them go. If friends stay, let them stay. Then that's just life's so much easier. It's sort
Yeah,
of more effortless, but
yeah,
that it becomes effortless because of all the effort that you put in
that's right.
to
Yeah,
change your operating system.
yeah. And it was funny because he kind of, as well, it's just the thing that I think, I don't know. I think males go through more. We've got this whole camaraderie thing, and we feel sometimes obliged to old friends because we've been friends with them for a very, very long time. But like you said, people come and go throughout our whole life, and if we can be not attached, as our old mate the Buddha said 2,500 years ago, then we can understand that people will come and go. And this client was from kind of a small country town, and I know it's harder in that environment because kind of everyone knows everyone and everyone's grown up together and it's this tight knit community. But like you said, if you want liberation, you need to understand that, you know, people will come and go and they'll be in our life at certain times and then they won't be. And that's okay. It's all
Mm.
okay. It's all okay at the end of the day. And that,
It's all okay, regardless of what it is.
Can I give you a? Oh, sorry. Go finish up what you were saying.
My client after the one I've just been talking about this morning, she's in a 12-month program, and she spoke about how she's a lot more carefree about things at the moment, and she intellectualized all of this IP that we're talking about, and all this Dharma, and all this the philosophy and everything, and she got it. She sat there and nodded, did all the nodding. Yes, I get it, I understand it, but she hadn't quite embodied it, and then she realized that she started embodying it, and months later, here she is going, oh, and I'm carefree, and we discussed, another word for attachment is care, and so she's saying I'm carefree is I'm free of a lot more of my attachments, and I'm just not so fixated on how things should be or how I want them to be, or people say certain things about me, and she goes, "It's weird. It's just everything's the same, but it's different. How And it's I'm like same but different. Oh, and the client this morning said, go back to what you were talking about earlier. The future self becomes the present self. I said I'm setting you homework to meditate for 15 minutes every morning, just observing the sensations, not with an app or anything, and do it in the morning so it's proactive instead of at the end of the day where it's more reactive to unwind. And we're not using it to relax, we're using it to experience impermanence on a very deep level. So, this sensation will arise, and we'll observe it without attachment, and then it will go. So we're actually experiencing on a really deep level the law of nature, which puts us back within the law of nature, which gets us grounded. I said, but the meditation that you do every 15 minutes isn't for you, it's for tomorrow's version of you. And so, in that regard, in that context, you're actually practicing self-love and self-care. It's taking the hard path now. We want to create a habit, not just do acts of meditation. So, creating this habit is going to be hard at the start, but then as it does, it gets easier because you start conditioning yourself. And so the version of you that exists, she's studying at the moment. She's like, oh, it's not like how it was last time I was at uni. It's a lot more stimulus, a lot more triggered. And I'm like, okay, so are you grounding yourself every morning? No, I'm just going into the day. I'm like, right, well,
Autopilot.
let's not expect you to not be triggered and to be calm, and let's do what it takes to become calm and composed. And she's like, yeah, right. But it's going to be effort and repeated effort.
Yeah, I like the carefree. It's like I care enough about myself that I'm going to stop caring about what other people are doing and saying.
Yeah, well, we've got the whiteboard here, so we'll just give it a quick little nudge for you.
You can't help yourself, mate. If the whiteboard's there, you just can't.
I can help myself. I'm choosing to do this.
Everyone who's listening and not on YouTube are like, oh, here he goes on his bloody whiteboard.
This is a conscious choice. So we write the one where will I put it? Over here. If I write care, it's going to be backwards, isn't it?
No. It's okay. That's fine. That was fine the way you were doing it.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. So write down carefree.
Carefree.
And then so it's 8 letters.
Mm-hmm.
And then write immediately under it in capitals. Write down in capitals under it fearless. Fearless. So that too is 8 letters. So each letter is under each other.
Yep.
So people want to be carefree and fearless. Yeah. I don't. So if we split those in half, so down the middle, so chop the 8 letters into 4 letters, and then we chop the words in half. So it's sort of like putting a plus sign in the middle of it all, quartering it.
Yep.
It suddenly turns into care, free, fear, less.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if care is attachment, we become free of our attachments, and that creates fear is anxiety, so it creates less anxiety.
And who doesn't want that?
So becoming free of our attachments creates less anxiety. Da, 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 da.
Da, 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 da. I like that one, Nick. That's good.
Yeah, I don't know how I came up with that. It just popped up in a session a few years ago, and I was like, oh, that works.
That works. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
No, I like that.
Yeah.
Carefree and fearless. Speaking of being fearless, can I give you a quick spider update?
God, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, so have had a bunch since we spoke last.
Oh,
Yeah, so I've killed a few. I'll be honest, but once again, no fear reaction. But I've also let a few stay, and I was actually I wasn't attached, but I was hoping because last night I had one right near where I'm recording right now, and I decided to just let him stay for the night. But since I got up this morning, he's moved on somewhere else. But I was
what kind of spiders are they? When I lived in Thailand, I can't remember seeing a spider.
they're huntsman-like creatures.
Right.
Yeah, but there's like quite huntsman-like ones, like with the small body and the real big legs, and they're quite big. But then
Yeah.
sometimes you get these kind of the bigger body, bigger. I don't know what they are, but but I literally,
Festively plump arachnids.
yeah, festively plump, yeah. But we're right next to the jungle, so they must sort of just come in here from the jungle. But it's good. It's been a great test one, but still no fear reaction. I've let two of them stay this week. I called them Daryl, like we spoke
Oh,
about,
good. Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
said, yeah, mate, enjoy. Feast on the little bugs or whatever you're doing here, and enjoy your stay.
So we watched a doco last night on Stan, the streaming service,
Hmm.
Stan, called The Littlest Big Farm, I think it was called.
Right.
The, the biggest little farm or something.
Okay.
Maybe it was the biggest little farm.
You're into little
But
things at the minute.
well, not really. It's just how it's happening. Well, for those that aren't watching, Ryan's really cracked up at his own joke there, and he's
Listeners,
still in it.
listeners, of, listeners of the show will know I'll be laughing hard at my own joke.
So the littlest big farm, I think it was, or the biggest little farm.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was brilliant. It was about a couple in America. My octopus teacher.
Yes.
I've spoken about that.
Yep.
And so the octopus sort of taught this human. The biggest little farm was kind of similar vein to that. A dog led them to change their life, and then they started trying to create a really um, amazing ecosystem where everything was in balance and harmony and everything. And this is here, so that's going to have a ripple effect. And
Mm-hmm.
it took them 7 years to sort of figure it out. But yeah, it was like oh, living with coyotes, living with gophers. How do they all fit into the ecosystem? So
Mm,
for you, it's like living with the spider. How can I live alongside these other species in harmony instead of being
yeah.
a typical human and freaking out and trying to kill them?
Yeah, because everything affects everything else, doesn't it? And I think that's why
Totally.
I might be getting this slightly wrong, but I'm pretty sure, they were reintroducing more wolves into Yellowstone Park in America because if
Yes.
there's a
Yes.
lack of them, then it affects the whole ecosystem of that
Totally.
beautiful natural park because, everything has an effect on everything else and everything's kind of got its place. And I think that's one of the things as human beings why we've fucked up the planet so much is because we haven't quite understood that and have and are still pillaging it for all the resources we can, not knowing that we can only do that for so long.
Mm. Well, we think it's ours and we think we're outside of nature. As David Attenborough said, we've broken free, which is so true. So in the biggest little farm, a problem would pop up and they'd be very reactive about it. And so they're growing all these amazing fruits, but all these snails in the billions would just descend upon this orchard and
Yeah,
just
right.
climb the trees and they're like, fuck, it's overwhelming. We're pulling them off, and how do we keep on top of this? And so they kept reacting and freaking out and going into anxiety and stress because of the attachment that they shouldn't be there and blah blah blah. But then he noticed his dog and he said, I just caught my dog sort of sitting there and just it was like he was deciphering how the world happens. And he goes, so I tried doing the same thing. So essentially, in terms of my work, he sat in that space between stimulus and response and just observed things objectively and didn't immediately react based on an irrational belief that there should be no snails on this tree. And so he sort of let go. He a bit more carefree. And then he sort of went, all right, well, there's a solution to this, and the solution was to bring the ducks out of the pond. And what love snails? It's ducks. So let's get the ducks from over there into here, and then all
A
the ducks were like,
ducks
"You
eat
fucking
snails, do
beauty," and
they?
they had at it, and it was oh by the truckload.
Yeah. There you
Yeah,
go.
they were hoeing in, and so they're eating all these snails, but they're passing through the ducks and turning into manure on the grass underneath the trees. So all of a
Hmm.
sudden, the snails are helping the trees to grow. And then there was like gophers. So what do we do with all the gophers? Because they're in the root systems of the trees, and it's like I won't give it all away, but it was amazing. All of these ripple effects, all these worlds colliding, like gophers and ducks and pigs and trees, and then you add rain and wind, and and nature's just doing nature. And
Mm.
these humans are trying to control it all, and finally they reached a point where they surrendered and let go. Like, we've got no fucking idea. Let's just take a step back. We are not bigger or stronger than the universe and Mother Nature, so let's start trying to work within it instead. And then bang, it just clicked, and it
It
was
just clicked. And we
yeah.
can do that with our own lives as well. A lot of the times we can just, it's very, very hard
Our
because
lives are our own.
we feel so stuck in, our emotional patterns and our behavioral patterns and all these kind of things. And we don't realize that we can, like that guy did when looking at the snails on his plants, we can kind of step back from our own life. And I still do this as a practice myself, and I'm like, what's Ryan up to at the minute? Like, and to
That's
start
what
to,
that's what I did this morning when the client said, "How are you?" I said, I'm very deliberately stepping away from my list of things to do, and like I'm prioritizing what's really important, which ones am I thinking I have to do because that's going to create tension and anxiety and stress, and I'm not going to enjoy this day because I've got so much to do and I'm so important and blah blah blah. And the reality is, I could just go and sit and read a book all day, and the world wouldn't change.
yeah,
So.
yeah. Yeah, because that's one I still got. I still get there. You got to be busy, and I'm like, there's this whole list of things to do, and I've got to, do, and then I'm like, no, you don't. Ryan, what are you doing at the minute? So we can objectively watch ourselves, even though we very much identify with ourselves. We can sit back as that awareness or that presence, and just look at our human, and just say, what's going on here, mate? With these behaviors or these thoughts or these emotions, and then we can start to work with them like that guy did with nature. I think that's a wonderful analogy.
Yeah, and so the concept of doing it deliberately, like I'm deliberately going to choose how I spend my time today.
Mm,
It's I'm not just going to let time pass me by. I'm going to choose. It's so precious time. Saying to this client, if so many people spend 1 second out of every minute present, so if they live for 60 years, they're going to actually be present for 1 year of their life. And she's
mhm.
like, "Oh, it's so sad." I'm like, "It is sad."
Yep.
So I think we really could do more to be more present and here for our life.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's like we have a list, in our mind of, well, today I do this work, and then I'm catching up with a friend for coffee, and then I'm going to see mum, and then I'm doing this, and it's like we're just doing things to tick off the boxes. Whereas if I'm
Uh,
deliberately doing each of those things, so like when I'm sitting with mum or I'm sitting with my friend having the coffee, I'm completely deliberate. Then I'm there. I'm not just waiting to tick off another box of that to-do list for my day.
we try and we're so irrational. It's hilarious. We try and convince ourselves so much that of the most craziest shit, like multitasking. Oh, I'm a great multitasker. I can do two things at once. No, you can't.
Mm.
You can not properly,
It's a
not
myth.
thoroughly.
Yeah.
Not you can do two things at once, but you're going to do half-ass job there and a half-ass job there, and you're going to open yourself up to mistakes. So you're doing the opposite of slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That would be just doing one thing at a time. And I love the concept of do one thing and do it well.
Mm.
So Emma's nature is a butterfly, and she said last night we're laying in bed, and she's like, I wish there was a school that I could go to where, first period it would be studying permaculture, then I could go to a Spanish class, then I could go to a guitar class. It'd be like the school of Emma, all the things Emma wants to learn. And and she's incredible at all she wants to do and achieve. But I in my mind, I'm like, But what if we did one thing and did it well? It's sort of like instead of traveling the whole globe and just touching on little places, what if we just lived in one space for a period of time and got to experience that? So what about we learn Spanish and knock that on the head? And that may take a couple of years, but let's learn Spanish. And once we've got that down, then let's go and learn guitar. And then once we've learned guitar, let's go and do
Mhm.
the next thing. But I'd
Yeah,
never get a
there's a
tell
good
of that.
book. There's a good book called The One Thing. I think Gary Keller is the author, but it'll come up. And yeah, that was a really good book speaking about this, like finding out what the one thing is, and then he speaks about it in a business context, but you can apply it to a life context as well. And one of the things he says is exactly what you said. It's this whole multitasking shit is just a myth. It's like just focus on the one thing and then give that all of your consciousness. Because when we start to split our attention, like you said, we do a half-assed job at a lot of things.
Yeah, I'm just reading the synopsis for it now. So the book discusses the value of simplifying one's workload by focusing on the one most important task in any given project.
Yeah, yeah, but it does. It translates well to life. After reading that book, we actually did a little mini retreat, like workshop thing, for some people, and I called it the one thing. It wasn't like based on the book or anything, but it was like just going through some different, life stuff and mental health stuff with people. But then the idea was when they leave the retreat, there's just that one thing that they know they needed to focus on and work on, and get
But
that right, because that was the biggest kind of cog that needed turning in their life.
yeah, but you can hear the discontent when people are trying to multitask. It's I have to do this, I have to be it all, I have to do it all, I have to have it all. It's this you can hear the attachments and the cravings there, the the thirst, the hunger. It's I need this, I need to do this, I need more, I need
Mhm.
more. Um, what would happen if we all sort of flipped it on our head and just did less, just were okay with doing less? And that doesn't mean don't achieve, don't set goals, but it's yeah, I don't know. I often marinate in a particular philosophy for a while, and one that's popped up um, probably last year was I can't do it all, I can't be it all, I can't have it all, and I found this watch that I liked, I'm deliberately not buying it. So I think I spoke about it last week, and that's just a meditative practice for me. It's in real life experience of I can't have it all. There's this watch that I like, so it's getting back to wants versus needs. I
Mhm.
want it, I've got an attachment to it, but I don't need it, so I'm not
Yeah.
going to then spend money on bringing it into my life.
I was just imagining you marinating like in the fridge overnight in a big glass bowl
Totally.
with cling wrap over the top, ready to be ready
Uh,
to be roasted the next day in a philosophy.
mm-mm. Basting,
This tastes
basting.
stoic.
Have you sprinkled a bit of Buddhism on this?
Yeah, but what is that marinade? Yeah, it's a mix of Stoicism and Buddhism.
Oh, you've stuffed this with equanimity, haven't
Yeah,
you?
that's why I'm so I can't form an opinion about it. I don't love it or hate it. I'm just letting it be.
That it'd be a slow cooked
Just
roast,
taste equanimous. It'd be
but
really slow cooked.
almost a still cooking.
A still cooking. You just leave it in the sun like a sun dried tomato for like 2 days.
Yeah,
Um,
a friend created some wine that way, asciutto, so it was air dried grapes.
right.
Yeah, it was a really unique taste. It was one of my favourite wines.
Yeah.
Delicious.
Can I talk to you about something that made me a bit angry this week?
Mm. If you feel like you need to, yes, of
I just want
course.
your opinion on it because you're
Okay,
you're there in Melbourne. It's about Melbourne. Nick and I are
right,
both from Melbourne. I'm still in Thailand. Been definitely a year now. I'm actually trying to get
mm,
home at the minute, but it ain't happening as yet.
right.
But obviously, you guys there have just come out of this little mini lockdown that
Yeah, a little
was
5 dayer.
imposed. Yeah, yeah. So I don't know if you saw this, but it definitely grabbed my attention that on the day that it was announced, there was I think 2 cases of COVID in Melbourne had popped up somewhere, and so the premier had said, Victoria's going into lockdown for the next 5 days, and Lifeline. This is where we can probably do a whole podcast on the effect of lockdowns on our mental health, but Lifeline, which is basically like a number for those who aren't in Australia. It's a emergency kind of number for mental health for people who are really struggling and oftentimes thinking about suicide, and needing someone to talk to immediately. And someone will lend an ear, try and talk them down a little bit, and then obviously try and direct them in the right area for services. So on the day that this new lockdown was announced, Victoria had 3,306 calls on that Saturday, which is the third highest number of calls in a single day in Lifeline's almost 60-year history, which is massive. And they said they saw similar spikes when the previous lockdowns, were announced, and also on the days when there was the massive bushfires in Victoria. So yeah, I'd like your thoughts on it, Nick. I mean, the effect of lockdowns on mental health.
Well,
And
what made you angry? Because you said made you angry. What exactly?
Okay, well,
going to my therapist for a minute.
Don't go into your therapist for a minute. Like I know I'm not sitting here angry about it, but I made myself angry at first because I thought to myself, of all those people, 3,306 people calling up this number who were oftentimes contemplating ending their life or having trouble being alive, based on two people getting a disease which have a 99.7% success rate of surviving and nearly 100% success rate if they're not over the age of 65. So that's what I was making myself a little bit angry in that context, because I was going into a little bit of empathy for all those people who obviously their mental health was greatly affected by the announcement of yet another lockdown.
So remember the podcast we did with Glenn Poole, CEO of
Australian Men's Health Forum?
Mental Health Forum, and we're talking about personal responsibility and should we take ownership over our happiness and health a bit more, and how many people are outsourcing happiness. So I too go into empathy for people that are in suffering, but if it's a lot of Stoic quote about we're more often afraid than we are hurt. So we're more suffering in imagination than reality. Yeah. So of those 3,300 odd people, most of them were more afraid than hurt. They felt hurt. They felt, but the majority of that would, I imagine, be unnecessary suffering, where they're going into these distortions, they're blowing things out of proportion. You can hear the deep attachments that they have to what they think should be happening, and so on and so forth. So it's a really interesting one, and as Glenn said, it's not about everyone should be responsible for the happiness, but no one should be responsible for the happiness. It's a collective, So society and the individual all need to work together. So when I'm looking at it from that perspective, I go into empathy for the people that are feeling so powerless, so helpless, that they're so affected by the state of the world. Yeah, and that's sad that people are so helpless. For me, that's this says how much work we have to do as a society, I think, and how much work we have to do as Myndfit practitioners to get people mentally, physically, healthy. But I don't see it's controlling the controllables. So what can we do about it? What's getting angry going to achieve? Is that because when we're angry, it's usually a case of fair and unfair, which is a distortion. So it's I don't know. I'm going around in circles a little bit because I'm just trying to decide which way I want to come at it from.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have the answers, but I'm looking at things on a macro level at the minute, because I'm not in Melbourne, and I'm looking at things on this larger scale, and it just seems to me like there's going to be a lot more damage being caused by these lockdowns.
Where does the responsibility lie? Like life's going to happen. It's
like I said, there's micro and macro. So there's personal responsibility, but so many people aren't in a position, like, during lockdown, the last one, the domestic violence went through the roof. And so do those not always, but oftentimes men who are the perpetrator in that instance, they're not going to take personal responsibility, and aren't going to be seeking help for their mental health because they're in denial that they have it. So then you've also got to say, well, there's also a responsibility on policymakers and government to say, hey, what are the actual short and long-term impact of what we're doing here? Because it sounds like there's going to be a lot more.
There's no right or wrong though. Like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If
Mhm.
you don't impose lockdown and health restrictions to keep, it's like, do you kill one person to save the many sort of discussion.
It's a tough one.
It is.
Yeah, because like they're only really people that die are people who are really old and really sick from the virus. And then but then here's the thing. Here's the thing. My mum and dad are in their 70s, so I definitely don't want my mum and dad to get it and die, because that's on a micro, that's very personal to me. But at the same time, on a macro level, I'm like, I mean, well, what's going to happen when summer finishes there in Melbourne and flu season starts again? The numbers are just going to go up again, and so we're just going to keep doing lockdowns forever. It's. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I do. But once again, go back to David Attenborough. Humans have broken free. And this can sound really callous and cold and clinical, but we need less humans on Earth. So we've broken free because we've come up with all of these cures for ailments and illnesses and everything. So in a very cold nutshell, more of us do need to die, and that's just the reality. We are, because you're looking at it macro from a human perspective. Look at it uber macro from a planetary perspective, and I'm sure so many species in Mother Nature are rooting for the virus to win and wipe a few more of those humans out.
So this is why Elon Musk is trying to colonize Mars, because it's not sustainable the way we're going.
I had this discussion at home the other night, and I was like, I personally don't agree with it. I don't think we deserve another planet until we can get this one right and coexist on this one. Anyway, I'll leave that for another podcast.
This one's better off without us, though. That's one of the things I said. If there was a mass extinction of human beings, and there's been mass extinctions, there's been 6 of them, I think, in the history of the Earth, or the 6th one's coming, one of those. But it's like, if all humans got wiped out, the planet would be fine. Rainforests would start regrowing, other species would start to flourish. Like, things would be great.
And we've fucked it in the blink of an eye, but if we all disappeared in the blink of an eye, another couple of 100 or 1,000 years, relative to the age of the universe, or the age of the planet, the planet would be fine in the blink of an eye in terms of universal time.
Exactly.
But we're looking at it through our human time and going, it's such a long time, it's going to take ages. Well, once again, that's our egos in play. So go back to the COVID conundrum. It depends on what level you're looking at it from. So if you're looking at it on a personal, family level, very micro level, of course we don't want our loved ones to die. But what's the reality? That we all will eventually die. So it's, I don't know. I just always come back to control and the controllables. What can I control? And that's how I choose to feel in any given situation. So I'm just moving to an acceptance that the world is in this state, and I'm not a decision maker. I'm not a policy maker. All I can do is help people that want help. The 3,300 that ring Lifeline. If a couple of them ring Myndfit and get in touch, that's what I can control. That's all I can do. So that's where my focus and attention needs to be.
That sounds very deliberate.
I'm going to deliberately punch you in the arm.
That's the word of the day. No, I like it. I like the word. You're right. Control the controllables. I don't want to be in charge of making these policies and that kind of thing. But I also think that there's going to be. There's already a lot of negative effects happening. But you're right. Either way we approach it, we'll only know in the fullness of time, I suppose.
Yes.
Let's talk about anger. What were we talking about in the last podcast? We said we were going to talk about anger. Was it the suppression of anger?
I don't know. I can't recall. Probably. It's and what lens do you want to look at anger through?
Um, I like what lens you want to look at anger through. So for anger, for me working with clients, anger has been pushed down, and this seems to be a cultural thing that's happened because anger has been quite destructive. It can be. It's like anything. Nothing's good or bad, But
So if
like
I'm angry and I want to punch someone, but I don't punch them, is that suppressing it?
depends. Depends
On
what you
what?
depends what you do with that inner energy. Depends whether you're pushing that inner energy down or you're letting that inner energy up. Because the energy of anger is also that's our power. That's our real power. That's our juice. So I think I like to look at it at that lens and say, oh, my
Do
anger
you see?
can be a force of destruction, but it can also be a force of personal power. Anger is what tells someone else no when I want to say no because my boundaries are being overstepped. If my anger's been suppressed and I just don't have any power anymore, then I'll just say yes and let people, you know, use me, or I'll be a people pleaser, and I'll have no power in my system.
You sometimes hear sports people talk about how if they're a bit flat or they're making some mistakes, they'll get angry, and that anger will refocus them, and they use their anger, they channel their anger to improve their performance.
It reminds me.
Do
Have
you
you
sub?
watched Have you watched The Last Dance on
Yes,
Netflix? Yeah, I only
yes, yeah,
watched it just
Michael.
recently because I've never been a basketball fan. My mates are, but anyway, I watched it. But yeah, that was Jordan. Like someone would say something to him that wasn't even that offensive at all, but he'd hold on to it, and then like 6 months later, when they played him, he'd take it out on them. And I remember one of them was this story, and it never actually happened. He just made up the story that someone slighted him just to give himself motivation for the next time they played, and he dominated and like won the game for them. So yeah, I think that's interesting. I do that
So
sometimes,
yeah,
like with weird stuff. Like, I've been getting in quite good shape again and eating right and going to the gym lately. And it's kind of like I'll look at myself in the mirror sometimes and be like, oh, what? Just because you're turning 37 next month, you're going to get out of shape. It's like I've made up that someone's, you know, challenging me in some respect when no one is except for myself. And it does. It gives fuel. It gives motivation.
hmm. It's each to their own. There's no right or wrong way. So this is all a philosophical discussion. Yeah. In our work in here, anger is we put that under the umbrella of suffering. Yeah. So anxiety, depression, anger, and guilt. All those four create this umbrella of suffering. And so we have necessary and then unnecessary suffering. Okay. So necessary suffering is as we spoke about, I'm getting heaps of texts about the Anger in the podcast, by the way. So many
Oh, yeah.
clients. I just laughed for the first 15 minutes of
I knew that'd be a hit.
it. And so that was an example of necessary suffering in the form of anger. It was a controlled anger, not once. It was a deliberate anger. Not once did I go into a distortion of it's unfair or he shouldn't be here or anything like that. I wasn't taking it personally. I was just I had to set a boundary. So yeah, it comes back to depends if it's necessary or unnecessary suffering for me personally. And if it's unnecessary suffering, then the anger will be destructive in its nature, and we're trying to construct a healthy life. We're trying to construct a relationship. If we're getting triggered and taking things personally, and then we're going into anger and that destructive nature, then to me it becomes problematic.
Yeah, so I
If
find I find
if we've got a
sorry.
partner, sorry, just quickly,
Mhm.
if a partner's crossing a boundary constantly and you know trying to hurt us or trying to harm us or whatever, and we set the boundary and they keep crossing it, that's where I think we can use anger constructively,
Mhm.
not to hurt them, but just to get to speak on their level. I had a client, the one this morning. I said to her, sometimes you need to fight fire with fire. Not always, but if it's done deliberately, it's a controlled burn, because her daughter wasn't hearing her, wasn't listening, kept crossing these boundaries. So instead of just being like a quiet church mouse, she actually roared like a lion, and it was such a different response
Mm.
that the daughter was like, "Oh Jesus, oh fuck, what's going on here?" And there's been a change, a really positive, healthy change has come out of that. So yeah, examples of constructive anger and destructive anger is, I guess, how I look at it.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like to me she used her power in that instance, and anger was her power, so it can be used in a positive context. I find that kind of the two destructive things that I see are one is just people have just such an accumulation of anger and all the cognitive distortions and everything where they're just externalizing their anger all the time. And there's a friend who's just fucking angry at everything, basically, I see that. But then what I see like so often is people who are scared to be angry. They're even scared of the feeling of anger because it's kind of been overcoupled with a fear response. And that can happen for many reasons, but oftentimes anger was seen as a bad thing when they were younger. Whenever they got angry, they were told to, put in another room or told, stop having, a tantrum or bad. You have to be a good boy or good girl. And so now there's this fear that's over the anger. So now as an adult, every time the anger starts to come up in the system, it gets slammed down with fear. Like I'm afraid to feel that. Yeah. So then what happens? They got this suppression of anger because it's overcoupled with fear. And then you'll find these weird behaviors or destructive behaviors start to come out because it's kind of like that energy needs expression in some way. So I often get people to start to, in session, in a safe place, start to feel their anger and start to feel, and oftentimes that can take time because once again, as soon as that anger we start to tap into it, it keeps getting shut down. It's very unconscious because we learned it early on. And so I try and get clients very familiar with the feeling of anger, but also see that this is your power. This is your block for that woman to be able to roar like a lion in the moment that called for it. That was her using her anger as her power, as opposed to using it destructively. So a lot of the work I do is trying to help people, I suppose, transmute a lot of suppressed anger into some personal power. Because if you feel anger, it's very uplifting. A lot of these other emotions are very, if they feel like they're pushing down, I start to go into a depressed state or apathy or shame or guilt. It's kind of a down flowing energy. Whereas anger is a very upflowing energy. There's a lot of energy in it. And I think that if we can start to channel that and use it correctly, it can be a very good thing for our mental health as opposed to a negative thing. What do you think, Nick?
I no,
Nick's Nick's frozen for a second. What I've said is just
no, you froze as
frozen.
well.
I froze your internet.
No, you froze. You've been frozen, but your words have been coming through. It's like honey
Beautiful.
to my ears. It's okay. Um, we're trying to help people to have an emotional response that's in proportion to what they're experiencing.
Hmm.
So Viktor Frankl said, an abnormal response to an abnormal situation is still a normal response.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So looking at anger, for a lot of my clients, they get heightened. So instead of being equanimous, calm and composed, they will get heightened, and a lot of that time it's because the ego's involved. So it's ego-driven anger, and they're taking it personally, or not being loved or liked, or not getting what they want. It's an adult tantrum. And a lot of the clients you're working with, as a child, they've been angry, and their parents have taken the easy path and just tried to tell them to not be angry. But kids are irrational. Kids are all ego based. It's just all ego as children. The whole world revolves around us.
Yep.
And some children never grow into adults, only by number, not by maturity levels. And so yeah, it's not healthy for the adult parents to suppress a child's anger and to teach them how to be more constructive in those situations. But the parent usually hasn't been taught either. So it's just
Mm.
all, so the source of suffering is attachment, who are getting what I want, but it's also ignorance. I don't know how to do anything other than what I'm doing.
100%.
So I think I did this one ages ago, like maybe in episode 2 or something. But I
Jeez, Nick, that is a while ago.
I love this one. It's something I share with clients. So you may remember it. You are holding a cup of coffee when someone comes along and bumps into you, making you spill your coffee everywhere. Why did you spill the coffee, Ryan?
I have heard this before, and I can't fucking remember the answer.
Yeah, you
I
got
spilled
angry
the
about
wait,
it.
wait, wait. I spilled the coffee because I had coffee in my cup.
Yes, you did. Yeah, you were right. You were right. Good job, you. Good job, Ryan. There you go.
Let's just say I did it because some dickhead bumped into me.
Well, yeah, and that's the answer most people will give is because I was bumped into,
Yep.
because this thing made me spill my coffee. You know, it. So you said before, these things made me angry. But you spilled your coffee, as you rightly said, because you had coffee in your cup. Had there been tea in the cup, you would have spilled tea. So the point is, whatever is inside the cup is what will spill out of it. Therefore, when life comes along and shakes you, which will happen, COVID, lockdown, whatever is inside you will come out. It's easy to fake it until you get rattled. So we have to ask ourselves, what's in my cup? When life gets tough, when I'm not getting what I want, when things aren't going my way, when my life's not perfect, when I'm being challenged, when there's obstacles, when my income and therefore sense of security is compromised. You know, what's going to come out? And these 3,300 odd people that called Lifeline, you know, as I said, the unnecessary suffering there, they would have been triggered. Um, I'm not getting what I want, so they would have gone into suffering there. So when life gets tough, what spills out? Is it joy, gratitude, peace, humility, acceptance? Or does anger and bitterness, harsh words, and resentment come out? So I think it's really important to deliberately take a look in the mirror and see what's really in our cup. Have a look at how we either mindfully respond when there's situations that occur, or how we mindlessly react. And if we're mindlessly reacting, what's coming out of us? And if it's anger, that's not a healthy thing.
Yeah, I found that working with people, when you think of the heavier emotions, so guilt, shame, anger, fear, sadness, hurt, that people tend to memorize one or two most predominantly. So like it could have been anger for me. In my journey, it was fear and guilt. So my cup would have been full of fear and guilt. So that was what would keep pouring over in my life.
Mine was anxiety.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yep.
anxiety was in my cup.
Yeah, so we can look at our lives, yeah, and like it's a really good analogy, and we can just see which is that one or two emotions that keep reoccurring over and over again, and they're the ones that our cup is just absolutely full of, and it doesn't take much stimulus at all for it to spill over, because it's like there's often the thing that we're angry at, we're not actually angry at, because like if that cup wasn't full of anger, it wouldn't make us angry at all.
Well, it's like we're not living in the reality of what is when we're angry in that destructive way. We're living in the reality of what we think should be happening. So
Mm,
it's the ego. Oh, I'm not getting what I want. What I want is to be able to go and visit friends and have a party and da 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 da. I can't get that at the moment because the stupid fucking premier says that we can't go and do these things.
mm,
Yeah, what a loser, You can hear the destructiveness in that, and that's all so unnecessary.
yeah, but it's like yeah, then I'm thinking as well, I'm like, well, what percentage of these of people that are calling are, even aware of have the education of tending to their garden or the education that, there's things we can do for our mental health. And once again, this comes back to the looking at the macro again, the education piece as well, you know.
Yeah, but it's suffering is coming from that ignorance. They're not aware that they have this superpower, which is to remain calm. That's considered a superpower by many. It's weird when the shit's going on and you know 10 people are in a room, 9 of them start freaking out, and one of them sits there and just observes things. It's he's seen to have a superpower, but it's just as Bruce Lee was saying, the most dangerous person in the room is the one that just sits there and observes things
Mm.
because he is in his power. And so when you talk about power, for me, that is true power is not reacting. True power
Yeah.
is staying in our power and not getting heightened.
So that person that Bruce Lee's describing, that's what I would describe as a man or woman that's integrated their anger. Okay, so that they've
So,
integrated their anger, and now they have a mass of just personal power.
okay. So I saw a video of bar footage in bumfuck Idaho or somewhere, Shittsville, Tennessee, somewhere in America, some dive bar,
Yeah.
and there's this couple of people just sitting in the bar drinking, just like in the movies, by themselves, throwing a few back. And then this dude comes in with a gun and starts pointing it around the room. And everyone dives to the ground. There's this one dude who just stays there. And it was weird. It was like he disappeared because the gunman just started moving around him. It was like on a subconscious level, he's like, oh, I shouldn't fuck with this dude because he's not hitting the ground. He's not reacting. You know, he hasn't given me his power yet, so I'm not going to go near him.
Right.
And this dude just calmly lit a cigarette, and the gunman finally came over and started to do something, and he went and snatched his wallet back off him, and the gunman's like, oh fuck it, I'll focus on all the low hanging fruit around him,
Yep.
and he just walked out after that, and the dude just sat at the bar the whole time, and I don't know if life was that bad for him that he just had given up completely and he was too carefree because remember this is a spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're at one end or the other, it's not. So I don't know what was going on in his head, but this from it was silent footage and just looking at it
Wow.
purely from that way, I was like, fuck, this dude's just in it.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, you never know. I'm like, when you first started talking about that, I'm like, did he just go into a complete freeze response? But I'm like, no, he's lighting up a dart and he's
Yeah.
snapping back. So,
No, he didn't
yeah,
shut down. He wasn't. He wasn't.
yeah.
He wasn't in his sympathetic nervous system
It's
at all. He
it's
was.
like, yeah, and who knows what was going on for him? He might have had a bloody cancer diagnosis and he had like a week to live or something. He's like, I don't give a fuck, mate. Or he just was living a fearless life, and he's like,
Or he was a kung fu master or something, and he knew that if push
yeah.
came to shove, he could fuck shit up if he wanted to.
It,
So
it's like in Breaking Bad. It's the first episode of Breaking Bad, which I only watched last year. I was a bit late with that, but it's literally in the first episode, and Walter White has just found out he's got this cancer diagnosis that he's just kept to himself. But it's he knows he's going to die from it, and his son has a disorder, so has to use crutches to walk and everything. And Walter's lived his whole life as this passive. He was a genius mind, but everyone stood over him in business, and he's teaching at a high school for a low wage, and just a very passive man. And he's got this diagnosis, and they're out clothes shopping, and these young kids come in and start making fun of his son. And it's normally something the wife would go and yell at them or whatever, and then Walter stops her. And he goes out the back door in the front and like just grabs the dude and throws him to the ground and about to stop making fun of this kid and blah, blah, blah. And he only does that because he just found out that I have a finite time here to live, and I'm not going to let this person, make fun of my son the way they are. Because in the past, I would have just stood there and let my wife yell at them and done nothing.
interesting. So there's a catalyst for a change there. It's it's amazing. Well, to go back to we've spoken about, Marcus Aurelius and that were unafraid of death. They'd meditate on their death. So when you meditate on your death and move into an acceptance of it, you stop being afraid of dying. It frees you to start living. And it's sort of a similar thing, I think, in that if we can be a bit more fearless, we become carefree. It's a synchronicity, right? It's all
It's coming full circle.
it has. But for me, it's also having that mind that's free of distortions. It's not only if we can be free up here, we can be free within ourselves, and so that's where we're in that position where we can choose. And to me, having that choice is the real power. Am I
Mm.
choosing to do this? When the guy was in the toilet the other day, I had to set a boundary. I chose to go into that space, and it's yeah. I think ultimately having choice is our true superpower.
Yeah, yeah, and we've got choice when we're aware and conscious that we do, and that's your
And
your
we can
mate
live
your mate Viktor
deliberate.
Frankl. Stimulus and response.
Yeah,
Your mate.
yeah. Our mate Buddha, our old mate
Our,
Buddha.
our mate
Yeah,
Buds. Our
yeah,
mate Buds.
Budsy, Budsy.
Budsy. All right, let's that's been an hour already, mate. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah,
So I think
yeah.
key points from today, we a few ideas we've thrown around anger, but I think the key point for people to take away is just see what's in your cup. So just notice what life brings up for you. Do you find yourself, fear being triggered mostly, or is guilt being triggered mostly, or is anger being triggered mostly, or whatever it is? Just start to notice, and that's just what you're holding in your cup, and that you're going to have to start to, if you want to grow in this way, start to let go of. And there's different things you can do that, but the first thing you have to do is become aware of it. And that also links in with, I think, living a deliberate life. Living a deliberate life means, hey, if I'm reacting with anger to things that happen on a daily basis, do I want to do that, or do I deliberately want to make change and not be in that angry
But
state anymore?
you've got to train and condition yourself. There's certain things you have to do to then create a capacity to live a deliberate life. You can't just expect to live it.
Yeah, growing in capacity. I love that.
Yes.
All right, carefree, fearless. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right, everyone.
Thank you, listeners.
Thank you, listeners. We'll see you all next week. Peace.
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 Double odds.
Peace, motherfuckers.